Good morning, everyone. We are joining you here from the Illinois Makerlab. We have just started this webinar and we'll wait a few seconds for people to join. And till then, we will give you a little bit of overview of what the specialization that we're offering in Coursera is. So my name is Vishal Sachdev. And we have Dr. Aric Rindfleisch here with us, who's also an instructor in the course. And we have our guest speaker here, Romain Kidd, who's the CEO of MyMiniFactory. So before we get into introducing our speaker, I'll take a few minutes to talk about the specialization itself. So this specialization on 3D printing has been on Coursera for about a year and a half, a little bit more than that. We have about 15,000 students who have started the first course that Aric leads, and the second course that I teach is about 7,500, and the third course on software modeling with the instructor Jeff Smith from Autodesk has about a similar number. And we are waiting to launch the fourth course in the series on hardware with Ultimaker, followed by our capstone, which will be led by another instructor from the University of Illinois. So with that, a little bit of background, I'll give it over to Dr. Aric Rindfleisch to introduce himself and his background a bit, and then we'll move on to Romain.
Okay, thank you, Vishal. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this rather chilly January Friday here in the Great Midwest. So this 3D printing specialization on Coursera that Vishal just told you about is part of a larger effort that we've been engaged in for now 5 years. We began the Illinois Makerlab, the world's first 3D printing lab in a business school, just around 5 years ago. We're in the main building, the business instructional facility on the third floor. So if you ever find yourself in Champaign or Urbana, please stop by our lab. And we've been, since we began, our mission has been to be the world's leading educator in desktop 3D printing technology. And we realized after a bit, although we have classes and workshops here in Champaign, we could only reach so many people because we live in a small community. So we began this Coursera effort as part of our outreach. And one of the things that we've been able to do through this effort is not just tell you the things that we know and we do here at the Illinois Makerlab, but also to tie in a number of leading experts throughout the desktop 3D printing community. So you'll see in our classes, in both the class that Vishal and I teach on Coursera, you'll see guest interviews, guest speakers from leading members of this community all around the world. And since the course was filmed at a certain point in time, we're trying to keep things updated in this fast-moving sphere of 3D printing by bringing you these webinars and bringing other folks to your attention. So we're delighted to have Romain Kidd, who's the CEO of MyMiniFactory. We've established a relationship with him over the past few months and been doing some work together. And we're really excited about the things that he's doing. And I think he has a similar mission in terms of reaching people around the globe and sharing our enthusiasm about this revolutionary new technology.
Thanks, Aric. Romain, over to you. Give us a background on yourself, and then tell us a little bit about MyMiniFactory as well.
Cool. Thanks, first of all, Vishal and Aric, and hello to everybody and thanks for being connected to us, or if you're viewing this later. Hope you'll have a good time. I'm Romain Kidd. I'm the CEO, as Aric mentioned, of MyMiniFactory. MyMiniFactory is a London, UK-based startup, a 5-year-old startup, and in this desktop consumer 3D printing space. We are a team of 10 people here in London, and before getting into what we do, I'll probably get into what we believe in. And of course, as you'll probably see through courses like this, and as you discover more about the world of 3D printing is an umbrella term. And really what 3D printing means for us in our context is really consumer desktop 3D printers. So we're talking about these machines that are making their way increasingly to living rooms, workshops, garages, wherever it might be, but in the hands of consumers. And there's really the potential for disrupting that. So our first belief, and I often talk about this as being a near religious belief, is that these machines will be everywhere in the future. So every household will have access to a consumer desktop 3D printer in their living room or elsewhere around the home. And what that means is, of course, it's going to create a huge need for content, right? The same way that everybody has a computer, everybody has a smartphone, everybody has TVs, it creates a huge need for content, software, applications, TV programs, video content. And it's the same thing for consumer 3D printers. So as these machines and as the technology diffuses itself to more and more households, it's going to create a huge need for content. On the other side, the other belief, and of course these are educated beliefs, and we have a good idea of what's going on through data, of course. But the second thing is there's an explosion of this 3D printable content that's happening. And this is driven by a few trends. First of all, we're seeing a lot of tools getting easier and easier to use, 3D design tools, 3D design software. I often exaggerate a bit, but a few years ago, learning how to design was pretty much something that you had to sign up at university for in order to get access to expensive software and actually learn how to make use of it. Right now, you can get started in a matter of minutes on free browser-based, no installation required type software that can get you started and help you create, start creating objects. More professional solutions are still readily available on the more technical aspects. But it's really easy to get started, which was not the case a few years ago. So that's going to continue as we go in line. And of course, more and more youngsters, teenagers, millennials, kids, whatever you want to call them, are learning how to use this software from a really young age. And of course, this digitally 3D native generation of users is fueling this creation of content. And the other thing for content creation that's a trend as well is that every smartphone that we carry in our pockets in the next few years will eventually become high-end 3D scanners. And we've already seen smartphone manufacturers today release applications based either on the existing photo camera sensors to create 3D objects, or even we see like the iPhone X, even if it's for a front-facing camera, but incorporating new types of sensors. So you can expect in the next few years every smartphone that we carry in our pockets to be a high-end 3D scanner. And just like for pictures, fueling platforms like Instagram, for example, or your video camera fueling platforms, again, like YouTube with video content, there's going to be a huge explosion of content. And so MyMiniFactory basically is seeing an opportunity there to fit in between the need for people to create content and the people to share and upload this content and build up their reputations as they go along. So MyMiniFactory is, we call ourselves the YouTube of 3D printing. And in many ways, just like that user-generated content platform, we're hosting the digital content by talented creators. A creator on YouTube is somebody who tells stories through videos. A creator on MyMiniFactory is a storyteller through objects, if you like. Both host the digital content on MyMiniFactory, and MyMiniFactory, just like YouTube again, is responsible for the distribution of this digital content. So we basically host the content by designers on MyMiniFactory and redistribute this content to people who have a need for this content and people who have a 3D printer at home, at school, or at the office. And so we fit in the middle there. One thing that we are not, and these is probably business models that you'll be seeing through this course as well, but we're not a factory in the cloud. We do not manufacture objects and then put them through the post. We're not a factory, even though the word factory is in our name. We're a purely digital factory, and we only host the content by these designers. As I mentioned, we've been around for 5 years, so a bit of an experience, and sometimes feel like veterans of the industry, even though it's only been 5 years, especially on the consumer aspects. And in that time, we've become the leading platform for curated content. Every single object on MyMiniFactory has been put through a process that involves both software as well as community test printing to make sure that people have a good experience with the files that they browse, explore, download, and send to their local desktop 3D printer. That means we now have more than 40,000 objects on the platform, all validated for 3D printing. These objects are again shared by designers. There's 7,500 of these designers published on MyMiniFactory today. We have some 2.5 million page views, and all of these numbers are obviously growing. And just to get an idea also of the demand side and the need for content, the market is roughly 1 million 3D printers sold ever. And that gives you an order of magnitude of how many users you have and this need for content, even though some machines might not be used anymore and some machines might be used in maker spaces and fab labs, for example, by more than one person. But 1 million machines sold, and we have on MyMiniFactory close to 400,000 downloads per month. So that also gives you an idea of the demand and where we are today on this curve, before eventually every person on the planet or every household having access to one of these devices. Just to finish off on the presentation for MyMiniFactory, I like to talk about our mission statement and what the team here is focused on a daily basis. Our mission statement is really to empower creators to share digital objects with 3D printer owners around the world. And that means a lot of things indeed, and that guides a lot of our decisions and our focus on a daily basis. But first and foremost, it's about empathy for designers and understanding who they are and how we can help them, and especially make sure that people can consume their content. So a big part of the technical development work especially is in removing the friction that exists between having a spark in your head and having somebody else on the other side of the world actually consuming the physical objects and holding it in their hand. How do we make that whole process in the middle much easier, and how do we make it so that more and more people can consume this content? And that's directing some of the projects that we have and decide on, of course. And then empowering creators is also about helping them get paid, of course. When you talk about these machines being everywhere, when you talk about designers being the future rock stars of the world of design, and the designer 2.0 really, well, these people are going to have to get paid. So a big part of what we do as well is innovating and trying to find new ways to help these designers indeed get paid and create this entire economy, if you like, around the content creation and building your brand and your reputation as a talented digital designer.
Right. Oh, okay. Thank you for that overview, Romain. I mean, one of the things that was interesting is your effort to monetize this for the designers. So, I mean, we've seen, of course, the big platform in the field is Thingiverse, and they've also tried to monetize, but you seem to be doing that a lot more. Does that work? How is that working for your platform?
Of course. So we're of course anticipating again a world where everybody has access to a 3D printer, and the demand for types of content that is hosted on MyMiniFactory is orders of magnitude bigger than what it might be today, right? We're not talking about 1 million machines sold. We're talking about hundreds of millions of machines sold with very different technology that allows us to increase the consumption and consume more through these devices. We're constantly iterating around opportunities for designers to monetize their content and their talent. But we do also have a particularity there. Everything on MyMiniFactory is indeed free to download, which is great if you're a 3D printer owner, because stuff is free, content is free, of course, and a lot of people like free stuff. But it's also good for designers because it means there's no barrier between them and getting their content consumed, right? Putting a price tag on anything means there's going to be a lower consumption rate. So free is great for getting your name out there, but free doesn't pay the bills, obviously. And so our entire challenge as an open platform, but also a platform that happens to host freely downloadable content, is figuring out the business models and the ways where we can redistribute some of the revenue that is generated on the platform, even though it might not be generated through selling files, for example. And so we've innovated quite a bit there as well. April 2016, so a bit more than a year and a half ago, we launched the MyMiniFactory Studios program, very much inspired by what you can see on a platform like YouTube. Once again, and I have mentioned that name already a few times, and they're a big inspiration. But whereby the creators on MyMiniFactory are actually receiving some of the advertising revenue that is generated on the platform. We were the first indeed to introduce tipping as an opportunity for designers to generate revenue. We have organized some dozens of design challenges, which are also opportunities for designers to participate and not only have an excuse to get started and learn how to design and have a challenge and a brief, if you like, but also good ways to work around brands and have some prizes there. And obviously there's also more ad hoc projects that might make sense for talented designers out there. And we're constantly thinking about new ways, of course. So that's all going to grow, and that's more importantly very central to our vision and empowering designers. If we don't crack that problem, eventually those designers will go back to what I call the old world, the old supply chain, and designing for traditional companies and not those that use digital distribution as a way to create these brands. So it's really a challenge, of course. And it's always something where we try to launch new stuff and showcase what can be done by talented designers out there.
Nice. Okay. Before the next question, I wanted to show the viewers a view of the lab as well, and perhaps find something interesting that's printing, and then ask you the question. So for those of you who've not seen the lab yet, I think if you're in the course, you would have seen enough videos which showcase the lab as well. So that is our line of printers. I think we have about 12 lined up in the center, and computers on the side, and of course that's we call them Max, or 6 foot tall replica, a full body scan and cut up into 83 pieces and made in the lab, and some of the extended Ultimaker extended and our old MakerBot cupcake as well, the first one that Aric started experimenting with. And let me show you and all the others something fun that was printing. Let me go back to my regular position. Okay, so here is one of the prints that was going on in the lab. I don't know which side is better. So Romain, can you guess what that is?
Not turtles?
Yes, there are turtles. It's a set of 3, 3, 6, and 3, 9 turtles that we are printing. So we are printing about 150 of them for a project, for a research unit on campus who's planning to place them in the wild and do some experiment. We don't have details of what experiment they're doing yet, but they plan to put them in the wild and evaluate some hypothesis. So that's sort of an example of one of the things that we print here. Now, leading off from that, give us a sense of, overview of what people design and what people print, because you have a platform and you aggregate that information.
Sure. So by being a platform where there's real activity, we have real data, of course, and we actually publish publicly quite a bit of this data through our monthly 3D printing content trends report linked in our footer of the website on the leftmost column. You can sign up there to receive all of this information. What we see is that there are obviously good use cases for consumer at-home 3D printing. And the top 6 categories on MyMiniFactory have consistently been the same since we started measuring and publishing this data, namely fan art, and cosplay that I sometimes put together. I call it the geeky, nerdy, early adopter content. And there's certainly a huge overlap with the early adopters that are using these machines and this type of content. We then have toys and games, which is sometimes with some kind of overlap, but quite a different audience at the end of the day. But what we're talking about there are action figures, are board games, are puzzles, and so on. Anything that you would expect to kind of pick up from a shelf at Toys R Us that is probably made out of hard plastic has good reasons to be 3D printed. And so an industry like toys and games, which is a $100 billion industry, we're not talking about an industry that's being born with 3D printing, is slowly being displaced, and the consumption habits of consumers are going from the kind of retail Toys R Us type model where I would drive up to the store to pick up this plastic toy and drive home with it. And they're being disrupted certainly by e-commerce and platforms like Amazon, where I can simply order this same content online. But of course, pure digital distribution is much more efficient than any kind of supply chain that you could have put in place between China and those shelves or those Amazon warehouses. Nobody beats the internet in terms of sharing of information. And also, an industry like toys and games is a very good example because of the creativity of the toy and how an open platform like MyMiniFactory can obviously win at something like this. The type of content, the speed, and how fast somebody on YouTube can react versus TV is astonishing, right? They have a huge weapon there, and that's one of the big reasons why YouTube is dominating the consumption habits of digitally native generations. What is also true with toys and games is just the model is better, even if you go past the creative aspects of an open platform. I think it makes no sense whatsoever in 2018 now, January 2018, that people in the toy industry, for example, are starting to think about what kids should be buying for Christmas 2019, probably, right? When they're going to miss whatever trend is going to happen in between. And I think last year was a good example with the fidget spinner, for example, that it came and it dropped as fast as it came. And without having access to speedy technology, let's call it like that, the internet for distributing information, you're probably going to miss out on a lot of opportunities. So there's good reasons why an industry, for example, like toys and games is going to be completely disrupted by consumer 3D printing and the internet aspects of sharing content and sharing objects. We then are the hosts also of Scan the World. Scan the World is an exceptional collection of some 10,000 statues, sculptures, and busts from all 5 continents. Again, very highly curated content, guaranteed 3D printable content, and a great way to explore art and culture and 3D print your own replicas at home. And then the other 2 categories that are in this top 6 list are home and garden, and that can be anything from your planter all the way to very functional items that you might need around the home, and gadgets and electronics. So we're talking about how to accessorize all of these devices that are increasingly part of our lives. Of course, everybody knows about the 3D printed smartphone case, but what does it mean in terms of unique elements to accessorize your GoPro? Devices like your Alexa or your Google Home can be equally accessorized and the experience enhanced through 3D printable custom-made accessories. Your Nintendo Switch accessories, for example, are super popular elements. 3D printable drone accessories are also there. So those top 6 categories, the cosplay and fan art, toys and games, Scan the World, the world's largest 3D printable museum, home and accessories, and gadgets and electronics. Those are the top 6 categories and the reasons people consume content today. That being said, of course, we all know that 3D printing is great for niche applications as well. And as much as they might not appear on the graphs that we publish, or at least not all the way to the top, there's super inspiring stories and content that is around certain elements. I always think and mention the example of 3D printable prosthetics. which have been great for telling a nice story around 3D printed, have attracted a lot of designers who got started thanks to stories like that. Thank God there's not more people who need access to these devices, so there's good reasons why it's not top of the download charts, but still super inspiring stories that are attracting new users and new designers to MyMiniFactory.
Thank you, Romain. Would you also like to say something about the challenges that are hosted on MyMiniFactory and how people could participate in that if they were interested?
Yeah, so we organize regular design challenges, whether with IP owners to help them take their content or their brands to the 3D printable world, whether with product companies. Again, I mentioned action cameras. We did a design challenge with an action camera company, how to accessorize their product with 3D printable accessories. We worked with a drone company to, same thing, accessorize their drones and give more reasons to get to buy into this central core platform in the first place. So brands, IP owners, product companies, and then brands also. We've worked with companies like Barclays Bank at the end of the day, who don't necessarily have a core product to accessorize or even IP in the copyright sense to work around, but just for community management and telling nice stories again and building libraries of content that actually help people in their daily life, for example. Those are good examples. So regular design challenges with these brands, we usually come up with a design brief. We've run dozens of these design challenges now, so we understand what makes sense as a design brief and how to formulate it, how also sometimes to help designers get started, whether for using templates that they can accessorize and design around, or other tricks to help people get started and not be confronted to the blank page syndrome, if you like. So these regular design challenges are a good way for designers to get an excuse to get started or to design more through a design challenge, through a design brief. And then completing these brief and submitting objects as part of a campaign. So literally thousands and thousands of objects submitted in these design challenges, and a super good excuse for a lot of people to learn about 3D design in the first place as well.
Thank you. Just a quick note to all the viewers, please type your questions. I know Martin has posted a question. And so we have Philippe from Spain here, Louis from Belgium. So, Philippe is an architect. Louis is currently in the finance industry looking to pivot to 3D printing. Amir is a physical therapist in Egypt, looking at prosthetics, and you were, briefly talking about that. So Martin has a question on, what is the revenue model of MyMiniFactory itself?
Yep. So the revenue models that we don't have today are B2C. So we don't charge users for downloading a file. Everything is free to download, like I mentioned. And equally, we don't charge designers for uploading content. There are platforms that do that. No, revenue today is B2B, and we've built a very targeted community around 3D printing and consumer 3D printing. So 2.5 million page views, nearly 400,000 downloads per month. 40,000 objects on the platform, 250,000 registered members. So that's a big targeted community. And obviously, if you're a 3D and 3D printing company, you have an obvious interest in putting your products in front of our community. So we generate this type of advertising revenue that is then indeed redistributed to the best content creators through programs like the Studios, MyMiniFactory Studios Designer Program, where the best, most talented designers on the platform generate a share of this advertising revenue that is redistributed onto them. So it's a B2B business model today with advertising revenue generated from helping brands and companies target our audience. That will probably change in the future, of course, and as the technology matures, as machines are smarter and smarter. A lot of these machines aren't yet connected to the internet, for example, and are pretty much offline, pretty dumb machines in many ways. but more and more are becoming smarter, and obviously that allows us as a platform to add more and more value to the experience. And so capturing more and more of that value is also something that we'll be looking at introducing potentially in the future through other types of business models, but that will come in the next few months or years.
I think Louis has a follow-up question, asking about whether you have a 3D printing service for individuals. I know you said you don't have the service facility, but he's sort of comparing it to the marketplace that Shapeways provides.
Yep. So our big focus, and that probably is the difference with some of these platforms that you just mentioned, is that we are really all about the digital distribution of the content. And as such, if we were to provide that type of service, it would mean basically building another business, right? You mentioned Shapeways. It's a totally different business model. They basically have a physical factory. They basically have expensive machines and invest a lot of capital into this equipment, and then basically run a logistics company behind. It's a whole supply chain. We are a team of 10 people, like I mentioned. What we're experts at doing is building software and building technology on the web, especially based on the web, and then building a platform and a community of people on top of that technology. So we have basically developers and marketers and community managers. What we don't have are people operating expensive machines. We don't have mechanical engineers, if you like, who are operating this supply chain or logistics staff experts for doing that. So that's our focus. Now, if you assume, like we do, that everybody will have access to a 3D printer at home, that's obviously a huge opportunity in and of itself. And I'm not saying that the business of Shapeways doesn't exist or won't exist in the future, but I think it will be limited to the types of technology that you won't have in your living room. Keep in mind that different machines can print different things, and so these different things will have different applications and use cases, right? Consumer desktop machines today can very easily print in melted plastic for FDM machines and in resin or for DLP and SLA machines. But if you want to print in metal, that's going to be difficult on an affordable consumer desktop type machine today. That might change in the future as this comes down in price. But so there might be a role for these platforms that do actually produce content. The same way that there are business models today that focus on satisfying the need for sharing digital pictures, for example. Let's mention Instagram, for example. And you also have businesses that actually are specialized in printing these pictures for people. And when you go to your local store and use the machine there to print a half dozen pictures once you've come back from your holidays, that's great. And then there are also business models where you upload your favorite pictures and a week later you receive a booklet with your favorite travel pictures, and that also exists. So I think 3D printing will be very similar. It's certainly today our focus and what we're aiming for is to satisfy the demand for digital content for 3D printing. And that's our expertise. That's our big bet at the end of the day, and that's where we're focused today.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so one of the things that many of our learners are concerned with, and besides the fact that yes, you can design and host on MyMiniFactory or even on Shapeways and on a marketplace and hope to get paid for your designs, but most of them, since the open source ethos has been prevalent in 3D printing, so a lot of the designs are still available for free. So besides that monetization opportunity, what other careers do you see that would, that we could say, hey, go ahead and learn this technology and this is possible, in the future, what you can do?
I think it's going to be very similar to, video editing or even graphic design, right? And there's certainly a lot of people who are starting off their own careers who are building up their own platforms as creators, who are building up their own audiences and so on. But I think, every media agency in the world has a graphic designer in-house, has a video editor in-house, right? And a lot of these people are that have the same skills, or at least the same technical skills, might be producing content, very similar type of content on the outside, but for other people. So, a 3D printable object designer, there'll be one in every media agency, advertising agency in the world, just because it'll be a good way to get content out there. So I think for the digital designers and the people who want to grow their brand and their collection of objects and their reputation and start a business, essentially like a YouTuber would be starting a business, if you like. I'm sure we'll find ways to help them over the years on MyMiniFactory to grow their little empires. But every other business in the world will have a good reason to be distributing digital content, and similarly, this content will need to be created. So I think look at what's happened with digital design, with video editing, for example, as a good way to see what's going to happen with 3D printing and the types of companies that might require these types of skills in the future. And of course, a lot of industries are using 3D printing on the industrial and the professional basis. And so, think about the reality of a technician, the reality working in a workshop, for example, the reality of an engineer using this technology for rapid prototyping. 3D printing will essentially be a tool to get the work done better, right? And so the same way as an engineer today, you're expected to know how to use a computer, you'll simply be expected how to use this machine that can produce an object, and that happens to be next to the photocopy machine in the office.
Okay, thank you. So, you talked about a few trends. One is, of course, about, your expectations of this technology being available in everybody's house, evolving similar to as YouTube has evolved. And, some of the trends we've already seen as software becoming easier to use. So now it's all browser based. You don't need to learn AutoCAD anymore or, Inventor. Any other trends that you see being critical to this particular technology over the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah. So one trend as well, which has been a reality of the last few years, is price, of course. The MakerBot cupcake that you just showed when touring the lab probably cost you guys what, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, something like that, and that was probably not that long ago, right? Five years ago, something like that. Yeah. And I would probably argue that it probably didn't even work, right, as a machine, or hardly. Now a machine, similar technology, FDM, entry level is probably going to cost you $200, right? So, 95% off the price that you guys paid for that machine. And we're getting to a very psychological price, right? We're talking about the same price as a PlayStation. And I don't think many people would see a PlayStation as a luxury item or something that it's still an expenditure, but it's not something superly expensive. So one trend is price, and I think we've hit a point now where the most popular machine sold on Amazon, for example, is a $220 consumer plug-and-play 3D printer, and that's hitting a price where price is not an excuse anymore to jump in. So I think that's a first trend that's super important. These machines are working, and that might sound a bit stupid to say it like that, but again, machines a few years ago, even the ones that did make it to be affordable, probably didn't work that well, to be honest, or you probably had to spend a lot of time calibrating and fixing and maintaining this machine on top of learning how to use it in the first place, and so on. So these devices they're cheap, but they're also reliable, and they work. We haven't moved on to Star Trek type technology, and that will be a trend for the years to come. Newer technologies are coming to the market. So whether replacing or sitting alongside FDM, DLP and SLA can make a lot of sense for certain applications, high detail, small objects, for example, that don't necessarily need to be durable. So great, that can sit alongside your other FDM affordable machine that you might have, and great applications include, for example, tabletop gaming, which is a huge market in itself. Again, look at the share price of a company like Games Workshop, which is again one of those that will be disrupted in the future. So new technologies are coming, similar trend, coming down in price, more and more reliability in those processes. We've seen companies, for example, in 2017 release full color desktop 3D printers, still there again, pretty expensive, not necessarily the most reliable, but that will come down in price in the 3 to 5 year scale time frame. You can expect these machines indeed to be just as cheap as the cheap ones we know today, and much more reliable. So again, new technology, new applications, more excuses to get into 3D printing in the first place. All of this goes well as well with convenience and ease of use. And that is one of the first things that we think about at MyMiniFactory, and how to empower designers is essentially how to make it as easy as possible for people to actually consume their content. And so as an open platform, we work with an API, we integrate with 3D printer manufacturers who use our API, for example, to pull content directly inside their slicing engines. We've launched, for example, another feature called MyMiniFactory Click and Print, which basically is a way to bypass the entire need for installing or even learning how to use your desktop slicing software. We automate all of that on myminifactory.com directly. That's also a functionality that's being ported to our mobile phone app on Android and iOS, and being integrated with Wi-Fi connected machines. So the experience we're talking about finalizing now and hopefully releasing in the next few weeks is basically unboxing an entry-level plug-and-play affordable machine, still FDM, powering that up the same way you would power up your television, and most people know how to do that, so no friction there and no learning curve there. Downloading the MyMiniFactory app and browsing through, and most people know how to do that on their YouTube app or their Instagram app. So again, no learning curve. And then clicking a couple of buttons and actually having the print starting on this consumer machine sitting next to it, and that could be done remotely even. And when we're talking about an experience like that, we're talking about an experience that virtually anybody can do, right? Can go through without having to figure out, without having to go through an online course sometimes, right? And that's still a requirement today to make sure you know how to use these things. You've got to invest the time, invest the brain power into learning how things work and doing it correctly, or else, your machine will stay idle because you don't know how to use it, or you don't know how to maintain it, or you don't know how to launch the print. And so we're getting rid of all that. And so ease of use, and more than ease of use, I would say it's about building a magical experience that is much closer to what the average person on this planet is used to when they click a button and 2 minutes later have a taxi automatically turn up at their front door. So that's the type of experience that we're building, and this ease of use and this convenience is greatly going to participate in increasing the demand. And again, that's why it's important for designers in the first place, is once you get rid of the friction, a lot more people come and consume your content. And again, that's what a creator wants. The first thing they want is for people to discover their artwork and consume their content. And so friction and a magical experience is really what we're focused on as a platform, as a content platform. And again, quality is super important there, but also as a software and a technology company building on top of this high quality content base. So expect some cool things to happen. And, in 3 to 5 years, we'll be in a totally different planet by then.
Nice. Thank you for that response. I know Aric had some questions.
Yes, Romain, I just wanted to maybe expand a bit on a statistic you mentioned earlier, that there's only around maybe 1 million 3D printers in the world today, maybe a bit higher, maybe between 1 to 1.5 or something like that. And so that's a kind of interesting perspective. I mean, 1 million of anything sounds like a lot. If you think about the world's population, which is probably approaching what?
8 billion, yeah.
And according to Wikipedia, there's about something like 3 billion personal computers in the world, right? But it took a while to get there. So there's lots of room for growth, right? So now you're getting, what I said, 400,000 downloads. That's with 1 million desktop printers. Once we have, 5 million or 1 billion, right? What those numbers look like. And so that's kind of, I guess, the downside of this movement, that very few people own a printer. I just did a survey asking about different device that people own. And as you'd expect, 80% of people, Americans, this is a survey among Americans, own a smartphone. 70% own a desktop computer, 65% own a laptop. Only 2%, actually 1.7 say they own a 3D printer, which I thought was high. But what's interesting, that the good news though is that even though it's a small number, I believe about 70% of all 3D printers today, of that 1 million, are actually desktop. Are actually desktops. So even though there's few of them, it's kind of interesting that those few are the small machines that you saw in the lab and the ones that are probably printing the downloads from your website.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting observation.
Yeah.
For sure. And, again, the growth will continue to be led by the consumer and the desktop technology. Another way of saying it is, there's more personal computers and smartphones than there are servers in the world, right? And so the consumerization of the technology and the diffusion of this technology to households is really what's going to drive the business models of the future, and the pure digital distribution of content that, again, you can't beat the internet, and it would be very stupid to bet against it. So look at more machines being sold. Again, 1.5 million, it's still an order of magnitude, and a lot of the machines owned and the installed capacity today is consumer and is desktop, but in many ways is also hobbyist, tinker, and maker technology. So probably things that you've put together yourself, probably things that you've assembled, and popular devices still today are machines that come in kits. So it's something that's going to evolve with, again, the technology, with the software, with the whole experience being much more magical, and also the profile of the people using these machines is going to change, where now it's limited to people who will invest the time in learning how the machine works, will invest the time in putting together the machine, will invest the time in learning how the software works. This is greatly going to change as the experience gets a lot more magic, and with a solution like Click and Print, and what we'll announce in a few weeks.
Okay. And just one last quick question, Romain, because we're running out of time, is one thing I've been thinking increasingly about, and I think you hit on this in your discussion, especially in comparison with YouTube. It appears that sites like MyMiniFactory and Thingiverse are sort of a combination of this access to products, a distribution site, a mini factory, but also a social media site. So one of the questions that I often struggle with is, why are people, and we do this as well, why are we sharing these creations rather than starting businesses, right? Ourselves and trying to sell these products. But perhaps it's not much different if I share a design for a iPhone case than sharing a video or sharing a photograph of what I had for dinner last night. Maybe that we had this culture, because so many people, and half the world's population, are on Facebook, and we're used to sharing. That might be part of what's going on. Do you think that this is there's also a social media aspect to something like MyMiniFactory?
For sure. If we go back in time, and let's say some 10 years ago when 3D printing really started, it was driven by open source, and there was a natural kind of wanting to share, because people wanted this technology to be accessible, to be available to everybody. And this open source driver, which is the same for software and platforms like GitHub, for example, is really what drove the sharing in the first few years. And so machine parts and iteration around the design of machines, we saw a lot of that, and still to this day, a lot of makers and tinkers are optimizing their machines, sharing back the blueprints for their, fan extruder ducts, for example, or accessories to just make their life easier and have better machines at the end of the day. So the open source side of sharing has been a huge driver. I think, like you mentioned, we live in a world where Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and Pinterest and all the other platforms are there and have developed a kind of habit for people to share their creations. But what we're also, we're very clear about is there needs to be ecosystems and opportunities for the best talented designers to actually share, let's say, on a more consistent and professional basis, potentially than me who fixes up an object and might as well put it up because I'm used to doing that and I just want people to find cool content on my profile. There are opportunities for the best talented designers, the same way that the best YouTubers are pretty much businesses at the end of the day. Well, it's going to be very similar, and the only reason these YouTubers are making a career out of it is because at the end of a month they can actually make it work. And so we're not going away from open source. That's still very true, but just in proportion to maybe the consumers jumping into 3D printing and the need for different type of content. This is where there'll also be a big driver in the motivation for designers, opportunities to actually make eventually a career out of this.
Okay. Well, thank you, Romain. I think we're just about finishing up here. Is there any last thoughts, words of advice I could share with our learners?
Don't hesitate to get in touch via my Twitter, for example, which is Romain Kidd, first name, last name, all attached, or by email at roman@myminifactory.com. So first name at myminifactory.com. And we love to hear from our users. We love to hear from designers. We love to hear questions about people in the community who might be interested in getting involved in one way or another. And we're obviously building an internal team of talented employees as well. And so we're always on the lookout for smart people to join the adventure. So don't hesitate to get in touch via Twitter or by email.
Great. Thank you, Romain. And thank you, Vishal, for the wonderful tour.
Oh, thank you. It was a pleasure.
I'd like to thank all our learners from around the world. We had people from all different places joining us today, and as well as those who will join us at a later date. And we look forward to seeing you, not just in our current classes, but also in our forthcoming hardware course, as well as the capstone, which will follow soon after. And hopefully, at some point, we'll see you in the Maker Lab.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Romain.